The moment arrived without warning. Angela Bennett settled into her plush 1A seat, felt the cabin's soft hum of engines and luxury lull her into tranquility until a crisp, entitled voice shattered it. "Excuse me, ma'am," Evelyn Stokes drawled, her tone frosty as she hovered beside Angela's armrest. "I believe you're in my seat." A white heiress, platinum elite, and born to privilege stood towering over Angela, a black woman who'd earned every inch of comfort. Gasps rippled through first class as fellow passengers watched the scene unfold like a staged performance of entitlement versus earned dignity. Angela's heart pounded not from fear, but from righteous indignation. In that charged moment, a single question hung in the recycled air. Would she yield to bigotry or stand firm in her right? If you believe dignity should never be compromised, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more chapters of this unforgettable showdown. Angela Bennett leaned back, letting the soft leather cradle her as she absorbed the kaleidoscope of memories that had shaped her journey to seat 1A. The gentle click of seatbelt buckles and the low murmur of the flight crew faded into the background as her mind drifted to nights spent working the late shift at the local department store, the fluorescent lights glaring overhead while her son Marcus dreamed peacefully at home, oblivious to the sacrifices unfolding on those retail floors. Each rung of her climb had demanded resilience, double shifts, skipped breaks, cracked knuckles from folding endless piles of linens. Yet every beat of sweat and moment of exhaustion had been an investment in a future where her son might never have to endure the same financial insecurities she had. She remembered the day she deposited the final check for Marcus's first semester of college. The university's ivory tower had seemed as distant as the moon when they sent their acceptance letter. But Angela, fueled by a mother's fierce love, had scraped together the funds through overtime and side gigs, convincing herself that sleep was overrated so long as Marcus's education remained sacrosanct. Watching him walk across the stage for his diploma valedictorian, no less, had been the proudest day of her life, even eclipsing the moment he launched Bennett Global into the Fortune 500. Her gaze drifted to the seat's headrest embossed with the airline's golden crest. To some, it was just a symbol of luxury. To Angela, it represented decades of perseverance, of countless nights, wondering whether her hard work would ever pay off. Now reclining in first class on this transcontinental flight, she knew she had earned more than a seat. She had earned her place seat 1A on merit alone. The memory of Marcus as a toddler, eyes wide with wonder as she pointed out city lights from the car window, surfaced with vivid clarity. She had taught him that to observe the world with curiosity, but also with compassion. He had absorbed those lessons and magnified them into a corporate ethos that valued ethics above profit. Bennett Global's reputation for fair labor practices and charitable giving had begun with his mother's unwavering example. Angela felt a surge of pride imagining Marcus in his corner office at Bennett Tower, surveying the New York skyline and steering his company with the same integrity she had modeled. A soft tap at her shoulder broke her reverie. Greg, a young flight attendant with an earnest smile and a crisp uniform, offered a chilled bottle of mineral water. "Can I get you anything else, Ms. Bennett?" he asked, genuine warmth in his eyes. Angela returned his kindness with her signature smile, a gesture both gracious and grateful. "No thank you, Greg. I'm all set." She watched him glide down the aisle, attending to other passengers, his professionalism, a reminder that many on this flight understood respect as a two-way street. She inhaled slowly, savoring the moment before the turbulence, to which she did not refer, only the roller coaster path of air currents, but also the emotional upheaval that often accompanied flights through a world still grappling with racial bias. Angela closed her eyes, recalling the countless times her composure had been tested well before this flight. The subtle slights in check-in lines, the assumption that her seat upgrade wasn't genuine, the unspoken judgments carved into the air around her. She had learned to steel herself with quiet dignity, transforming every slight into fuel for her determination. Now, as she leaned into the seat's ergonomic embrace, Angela felt that same steely resolve flicker to life once more. She had not come this far to be intimidated by a woman defined solely by her lineage and wealth. She would not relinquish the seat she rightfully held, nor would she allow Evelyn Stokes or anyone else to weaponize privilege against her. Her 1A seat was more than a travel perk. It was a testament to her life's work, a symbol of respect, earned through grit, sacrifice, and unwavering self-worth. The hum of the engines shifted, a gentle reminder that this flight-like life would carry them across vast distances, both physical and metaphorical. Angela leaned forward slightly, adjusted the glossy magazine on the tray table, and flexed her fingers against the cool armrest. She knew the turbulence ahead wouldn't be measured by altitude and airspeed, but by the collision of entitlement and dignity unfolding mere inches away. As the flight attendant paused at the front of the cabin and the tension mounted once more, Angela opened her eyes calm and unyielding. She was ready. Not just to keep her seat, but to stand as an example that true entitlement comes not from birthright, but from the unshakable commitment to one's own perseverance and the courage to claim the respect so long denied. Evelyn Stokes moved through the galley door like a queen, entering her throne room, and the cabin seemed to part for her arrival. The soft lighting that bathed the plush cream upholstery in a warm glow suddenly felt too dim to showcase her designer silk dress, an ivory sheath cut to perfection, hugged by a camel-colored cashmere wrap draped over one shoulder. Each footfall in her Louboutin pumps sounded like a ticking metronome measuring out the privilege she felt owed. Her platinum blonde hair was coiffed into a sleek chignon that reflected the subtle shimmer of the overhead lights, and her diamond studs winked at admirers who weren't there yet. As Evelyn's gaze swept across the first-class cabin, it was clear she expected deference. She scanned the row of empty seats lined up like gleaming chariots reserved for the world's elite. When her eyes finally settled on 1A, where Angela Bennett reclined, she frowned imperceptibly, an almost imperceptible crease at the corner of her mouth that spoke volumes. How dare a stranger occupy her rightful perch? Behind Evelyn, her assistant Linda Harper hovered in her wake. Linda's demure frame was swathed in a navy blazer and skirt, her posture slightly stooped as though accustomed to curtsying before society's finest. She clutched a smartphone in one hand, scrolling frantically through flight details, her tiny brow furrowed with anxiety. Evelyn paid her companion no mind. This was Evelyn's world, and everyone else existed solely to support her narrative. Evelyn's high-arched eyebrows rose in regal inquiry as she paused before 1A. She surveyed the occupant with cool assessment, a serene black woman head gently turned toward the window, lost in thought. To Evelyn, this woman was an imposter, an aberration in the carefully curated order of premium seating. No one had whispered that Angela belonged here. Rather, the unspoken assumption that first class remained the exclusive domain of silver spoons and stock portfolios steeled Evelyn's conviction. She stepped forward with a deliberate elegance, each step tracing lines of entitlement. Passengers glanced up from their magazines and tablet screens, curiosity flickering across their faces. Some stiffened as though watching a live performance of hubris. Others leaned forward, sensing that a storm was about to be unleashed in their usually placid sanctuary. Only the flight attendants trained to recognize every social cue stood ready to mediate to cushion Evelyn's expected indignation. Miss Stokes called Linda in a soft yet urgent whisper, trying to match her stride to Evelyn's. "I have confirmation here seat 1A was held for you weeks ago." Evelyn did not slow. She raised her chin and inhaled as though snorting out any trace of doubt. The rest of the cabin seemed to fade into the background. Her focus tightened to a pinpoint on Angela's seat. Finally, she stopped, placing a perfectly manicured hand on her hip. "Linda," she said, her voice low, yet loud enough to carry it. "Appears my seat has been taken by someone who clearly doesn't deserve it." Her words hung in the air with a chill that cut through the cotton candy haze of cabin service. The flight attendant nearest to 1A, a young man named Greg, paused mid-refill of a champagne flute, eyes darting between Evelyn's poised frame and Angela's calm composure. Angela, for her part, remained still as though she knew the spectacle had already commenced. Hers was the kind of serenity that came from years of navigating life's slights without drama. Yet inside, a tiny spark of indignation glimmered because she had earned that seat and because humility should never be weaponized as a cudgel. Evelyn's lip curled slightly as she watched Greg hover with uncertain deference. "Excuse me," she said, her tone too crisp to be polite, "but I would like an explanation for why I'm not in my designated seat." Greg swallowed his professional training, scrambling to the forefront. Rather than confront this platinum elite dynamo head-on, he offered a rehearsed apology. "Ms. Stokes, let me verify your reservation. Please hold for just a moment." He retreated down the aisle, leaving Evelyn's impatient gaze to roam. The cabin fell almost silent. A couple across the aisle craned forward, smartphones discreetly poised, while others exchanged glances that ranged from sympathy for Angela to irritation at Evelyn's brazen presumption. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant clink of ice in glasses were swallowed by the taut tension that coiled around every plush leather seat. Linda, small and apologetic, sidled up beside Evelyn. "It must have been a mistake," she murmured. "I booked you 1A as soon as our agent confirmed the change. I'm so sorry about this." Evelyn turned to her assistant, her voice soft but steely. "Mistake. Linda, this is unacceptable. I have a business meeting in London tomorrow. My seat is non-negotiable. Do you understand?" She let the words sink in, her eyes burning with silent fury that Linda could feel like a physical blow. Minutes stretched as Greg returned, clipboard in hand, offering a bow so slight it barely registered. "Ms. Stokes," he began, voice tentative, "I have checked the manifest seat. 1A is indeed reserved for Miss Bennet." He paused, anxiety rippling through his palms. "There appears to have been a booking error on our end. I can booking error." Evelyn cut in every syllable an accusation. "Do you realize how many times I've flown with this airline?" "You had one job, Greg. One job." She closed her eyes briefly as if summoning her composure before reopening them to fix Angela with a look that said, "I expect you to get up and move." Angela's cheeks stung not with fear, but with the ache of injustice. She had devoted her life to raising Marcus with integrity, never imagining that she would be singled out in her moment of deserved comfort. Yet she also understood that real power rarely materializes in grand gestures. It nestles quietly in unwavering resolve. Instead of replying, Angela allowed a single nod, the tiniest affirmation that she was fully aware of Evelyn's demand and fully confident in her own right to refuse. That silent pushback was as potent as any argument. Linda's shoulders slumped. Evelyn's breathing hitched a tension belying her efforts to remain in control. The flight attendant's apologetic expression sharpened under her gaze, torn between corporate policy and the instinct to placate this formidable customer. In that standoff, the cabin transformed from a cozy cocoon of luxury travel into an arena for a clash of values. On one side stood Evelyn, the living embodiment of entitled tradition, convinced that birthright trumped every other claim. On the other stood Angela, the testament to self-made dignity, certain that respect must be earned, not bestowed by pedigree. Greg, summoning courage, stepped forward. "Ms. Stokes, if you'd like, I can offer you an equally comfortable seat, 2A, just adjacent. It's still within our first-class section." His voice softened, understanding that diffusing Evelyn's rage required more than hollow apologies. But Evelyn's gaze flicked disdainfully past Greg to Angela, whose serene smile only fanned the flames of her fury. "I didn't pay for equally comfortable," she snapped. "I paid for the best seat on this plane, 1A. I expect 1A." Greg's jaw clenched. He glanced at Linda, who now hovered helplessly, and then back at Angela. He knew offering an alternative would be the polite route, but he also recognized the absurdity of placating entitlement to the detriment of fairness. Yet policy was policy. Evelyn was platinum elite, and loyalty status often tipped the scales. Angela watched it all unfold with measured calm. Inside, her pulse quickened not out of panic, but with the rising adrenaline of moral clarity. Every instinct told her that giving up her seat would betray everything she stood for and would reward the very arrogance that insults achievement and identity. The cabin fell into an expectant hush, the soft murmur of other passengers replaced by the quiet symphony of conflict. Evelyn's arms tightened around her cashmere wrapped knuckles, paling as she prepared her next blow. Angela met Evelyn's glare with unflinching eyes, radiating the kind of quiet power that only comes from knowing you stand on solid ground. There in the heart of first class, two women embodied the turbulent intersection of privilege and principle, one wielding wealth as entitlement, the other wielding integrity as armor. The outcome of their unspoken duel would ripple far beyond this flight, echoing in boardrooms and living rooms alike, a potent reminder that dignity belongs to the deserving, not the entitled. And as Greg opened his mouth to navigate the next move, Angela felt the world lean in, waiting for her to shape the moment with her answer. Evelyn Stokes planted her stiletto heel squarely in the aisle, folding her arms as if she'd hoisted a personal flag of entitlement. The cabin's warm lighting glinted off her diamond studs and the soft sheen of her silk dress. She fixed Angela Bennett with a gaze that dared any obstacle to stand in her way. "Ma'am," Evelyn said, voice edged with steel, despite the polite phrasing, "that seat is mine." Angela, reclining in 1A, felt the words as a splash of cold water. She looked up from adjusting the leather headrest and met Evelyn's glare with unshaken calm. Around them, first-class passengers leaned forward, eyes gleaming with interest and an unuttered question. Would this wealthy heir push aside an ordinary passenger who looked nothing like her? Angela closed her eyes for a heartbeat, inhaling the soft scent of vanilla from her essential oil diffuser, her secret comfort on flights. Then she opened them, leveled a polite, composed smile at Evelyn, and reached into her designer tote. Fingers brushed the smooth edge of her boarding pass, printed in bold, precise font. Seat 1A, Bennett, Angela. Actually, Angela replied, voice steady and gracious. I believe this seat belongs to me. She extended the pass in a gesture both gentle and firm. Evelyn's mouth twitched surprise, flickering behind her sculpted facade. She glanced at the pass, then at Angela's unruffled expression. A murmur rippled through the cabin, wheels paused in mid-roll silverware, halted in mid-air. Even the engine's drone seemed to dim as every eye turned toward this confrontation. Greg, the young flight attendant, whose friendly demeanor had greeted Angela moments before, stepped forward with a professional half-smile, masking his unease. He cleared his throat, voice a notch higher than intended. Ms. Stokes, may I see your boarding pass? Evelyn shot Greg a look that could have frozen champagne. She fumbled for her clutch, retrieving a sleek white card with her name emblazoned in cursive. Here it is, she said, voice cool. Greg took both passes and retreated a few steps to compare names and seat numbers on his tablet. The cabin's tension coalesced around him. Neighbors craned forward, cell phones subtly angled to capture the drama. Evelyn shifted her weight, crossing one leg over the other, her expression a study in aristocratic impatience. Angela remained seated, posture straight, fingers lightly clasped in her lap. Passengers exchanged glances. A banker in a sharp suit behind Angela gave a sympathetic nod, lips pressed in disapproval toward Evelyn. A young couple 2 rows ahead leaned in, eyes flickering with hope that justice would prevail. A grandmother 3 seats down clasped a tissue in her hand. Silent solidarity in her gaze. Greg tapped at his screen, scrolling through the manifest. He exhaled, adjusting his crisp tie. Ms. Bennett, your pass is confirmed for 1A. Ms. Stokes, your seat is 2A adjacent. Evelyn's eyes flared. Are you serious? She demanded, voice slicing through the cabin's hush. I paid for 1A. Do you know who I am? Angela's heart thudded, not from intimidation, but with the familiar ache of injustice. She inhaled, letting gentleness anchor her resolve. With all due respect, Ms. Stokes, my ticket was issued and confirmed weeks ago. I have every right to this seat. Evelyn snarled, turning on her heel to face Angela directly. She took a step forward, closing the distance as though sheer proximity might bulldoze Angela into compliance. That seat is reserved for Platinum Elite members, people like me who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with this airline every year. You're not even a member. Angela met her challenge without flinching. I'm not a frequent flyer, but I paid the full first-class fare just like you. This seat isn't your birthright. It's a contract between me and the airline. A whisper ran through the cabin. Well said. Go on. She's right. Greg hovered awkwardly, torn between policy and appeasement. Evelyn's designer-framed sunglasses perched atop her head, glimmering like icy sentinels. She shook them free and slid them down to glare at Angela over the lenses. Contracts. Evelyn scoffed. This isn't a courtroom. This is first class. Do you know who I am? Angela drew in a calm breath. I know who I am. I'm a mother who's worked her entire life to earn every opportunity for myself and my son. I deserve this seat as much as anyone else. Silence stretched taut, as though the fuselage itself held its breath. Even the flight attendants paused awaiting Greg's next move. Evelyn's nostrils flared as she weighed her options: escalate, placate, or withdraw. Her gloved hand hovered over the back of Angela's seat, the implicit command in her posture: clear yield or face oblivion. Greg stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Ms. Stokes, if you would like to discuss an upgrade or alternative arrangements, I'd be happy to help." Evelyn whipped her head toward Greg, fury and humiliation painting her features. "No," she seethed. "I want 1A. Make it happen." Greg's professional mask cracked for a fraction of a second, a flicker of sympathy for Angela, then worry at the growing stakes. He turned to swipe on his screen again, seeking an impossible solution. On Angela's right, a middle-aged businessman cleared his throat and offered, "I can switch to 3A." "Ma'am," his voice low but firm. Angela placed a hand on his arm to stop him. She had no interest in a private barter. Her stand was principle, not negotiation. Evelyn's protest rose another octave. "I'll call the manager." "You can't just refuse a Platinum Elite member her seat." Her voice trailed into a frantic pitch, undignified for someone so accustomed to deference. Angela pressed her lips together, keeping her demeanor regal. She didn't look away from Evelyn's stormy stare. "If you'd like to call someone," she said softly, "feel free. My ticket is valid. My seat is legal. I'll stay right here." In that quiet exchange, the cabin seemed to tilt on its axis. Two women worlds apart held their ground, one buoyed by wealth and self-importance, the other by quiet dignity and hard-won rights. The first-class sanctuary had become a crucible for raw human conflict, rawer than any closed-door boardroom. Greg finally lowered his tablet, brow furrowed. He met Angela's eyes with an unspoken apology. "Ms. Bennett," he began, voice gentle, "your reservation is confirmed. Please remain seated." A collective exhale rippled through the cabin. Some passengers sank back relieved. Others reached for their phones, screens glowing with the promise of virality. Evelyn's shoulders slumped, her posture deflated for the first time in years. She turned on her heel and stalked toward the galley, Linda Harper scurrying behind, chastened and muttering apologies. Angela exhaled, her heart still fluttering with adrenaline. She allowed herself a brief smile at Greg's earnest glance. "Thank you," she said quietly. As the cabin's normal rhythm resumed, the clink of glass, the rustle of magazines, the soft murmur of safety demonstrations. Angela settled back into her seat. Evelyn's departure from 1A was more than a concession. It was a testament to the fact that privilege, when wielded without respect, will always clash with principle. Angela straightened her scarf, smoothed her jacket, and gazed out the window at the tapestry of clouds below. The sun had dipped just beyond the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of rose and gold. She sipped her mineral water, savoring the stillness of victory born not from aggression, but from unshakable self-respect. And somewhere in a corner office at Bennett Tower, Marcus Bennett would soon receive the call that this first standoff had been won not by force, but by the graceful power of dignity under pressure. The moment Angela Bennett dared to hold her ground, the cabin's atmosphere shifted from tense anticipation to palpable dread for her, but also for the crew caught between protocol and patron. Greg Foster, the young flight attendant whose bright smile had greeted her earlier, now hovered at the aisle's edge, voice tight as he sought damage control. Ms. Bennett, Greg began adopting a tone that was equal parts apology and plea. "We really don't want any inconvenience. Could you please perhaps consider another seat? We can move you to 2A, still first class, of course." Angela studied him for a beat, notes of frustration and weary resolve flickering across his face. She had seen this script before, the courteous facade crumbling to reveal the airline's true priority, placating the Platinum Elite. She drew in a calm breath, steadying herself. "Greg," she said, voice soft but deliberate, "I'm perfectly comfortable here. My reservation is valid. If you would check the manifest again, you'll see I paid for 1A just like Miss Stokes did." Greg's shoulders tensed. He glanced back toward the galley as though seeking help from the silver-clad angels beyond the curtain. Instead, he found Deborah Lane, the flight supervisor, striding briskly toward them. Deborah's crisp navy jacket and prim white blouse spoke of authority. Her perfectly pinned badge glinted under the cabin lights. Yet Angela could see the flicker of uncertainty in Deborah's eyes as she approached. Ms. Bennett. Deborah said, voice calm but undercut with the slightest tremor. I understand your frustration. However, Ms. Stokes is a Platinum Elite member. Your airline gives certain passengers special privileges. Angela interrupted, crisp but polite. The cabin leaned in. A businesswoman 2 rows back set aside her phone, curiosity alight in her gaze. Deborah opened her mouth, hesitated, then took a steadying breath. It's standard practice to accommodate our highest-tier customers. It's also standard practice to honor paid reservations, Angela countered. She reclined, slightly confident but firm. I paid the full first-class fare. No contract states that citizenship in the Platinum Elite Club can void that payment. Deborah's lips thinned. She exchanged a quick glance with Greg, who offered a helpless shrug. Their uniform symbols of duty had become passive weapons in the service of wealth rather than fairness. Angela felt a surge of righteous anger. This wasn't about policy nuance, but about how 2 employees chose to wield discretion. Deborah glanced around at the assembled passengers, many of whom now watched her as if she held their collective fate in her clipboard. She folded her hands in front of her, the picture of diplomatic conflict. Her voice softened. Miss Bennett, I'm not asking you to be difficult. It's just that sometimes we need to be flexible to ensure the best service for all. Behind Deborah. Greg pressed a hand to his forehead, brow furrowing with guilt. He cleared his throat. Maybe we can find a compromise. I'm out. If Ms. Stokes sits here, perhaps we can upgrade you to first-class lounge access after landing, or a voucher for your next flight. Angela's lips quirked in a polite, dismissive smile. A voucher. With all due respect, Greg, what happened here isn't an inconvenience, it's discrimination. I'm not asking for compensation. I'm asking to be treated like any other passenger. If you'd simply honor my paid reservation, we wouldn't be in this position. Deborah's breath caught. She shifted her stance as though the weight of Angela's words had snapped her out of a stupor. I understand your point. She looked over at Greg, then back at Angela. Let me make a call to the purser. Perhaps we can get further guidance. Greg nodded eagerly and retreated down the aisle, leaving Deborah to stand between Angela and the now empty 1A. Passengers exhaled collectively, the cabin's silent choir acknowledging Angela's moral victory, but also bracing for the next wave. Evelyn Stokes, perched just behind, pressed her palms to the back of her seat knuckles, whitening. She leaned forward, eyes cold steel. This is absurd, she hissed at Linda Harper, who hovered with trembling hands. I want that seat. I pay for that seat. I am that seat. Linda swallowed, hesitating. She whispered something inaudible, her voice quaking under Evelyn's glare. Evelyn turned back toward Deborah, indignation and panic aflame in her blue eyes. Supervisor Lane, she said, voice loud enough to draw renewed attention. I expect you to resolve this immediately. I will not be moved from the seat I booked. Is that understood? Deborah straightened, chest rising. The flight supervisor's badge on her lapel felt suddenly heavy, dangling over a chasm between caring for all passengers and kowtowing to one. She offered a placating nod to Evelyn. I understand, Ms. Stokes. I will get clarification right away. Without looking back, Deborah turned and strode toward the galley, leaving a tense wake of unsettled passengers. Greg hovered in doorway, awaiting Deborah's return. Linda retreated to her seat, face ashen. Angela watched the drama with calm detachment, but inside her heart thudded with both indignation and relief. The confrontation had forced the airline's hand, exposing their bias. A cluster of passengers whispered among themselves, sympathetic glances offered to Angela. A young father with a sleeping infant gave Angela a thumbs up. Across the aisle, an elderly woman dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Even Evelyn's ever-present entourage seemed to shrink under the weight of public scrutiny. The aura of unquestioned entitlement flickered like a dying flame. Moments later, Deborah returned, her expression unreadable. She crossed the aisle, shoulders squared, and faced Angela. Ms. Bennett. She began, voice firm but contrite. I've spoken with the purser and checked our records. Your seat is confirmed. I deeply apologize for the confusion and for any distress this situation has caused. Angela inclined her head, the faintest smile of vindication touching her lips. Thank you, Deborah. That's all I've ever wanted. She sank into the plush leather of 1A, reclaiming her place as though testing whether the seat would still support her. Deborah offered a grateful nod to Angela, then turned to Evelyn with equal firmness. Sis Stokes Petika seat 2A remains available for you. I'm truly sorry for the mix-up. Evelyn's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words emerged. A moment later, she slumped back into 2A hands, flailing for the armrests as though solid ground might vanish beneath her feet. Linda leaned in to comfort her, murmuring apologies that only deepened Evelyn's mortification. The cabin exhaled again, this time with relief that the standoff had ended, even if the outcome left an air of awkwardness. Greg reappeared with fresh towels and water, offering them to Angela, with a respectful bow that Angela returned with heartfelt thanks. Other flight attendants resumed their duties, though whispers continued to ripple through the cabin about bias, about entitlement, about the power dynamics of wealth and race. Angela settled back, feeling the burn of adrenaline fade into the soft glow of accomplishment. She gazed out at the slowly darkening sky, the horizon's amber glow reminding her that for every challenge there was a moment of light. In the hush that followed, she drew even deeper into her seat's embrace and allowed herself a quiet thought. The real turbulence lay not in the clouds below, but in the murky currents of human prejudice, and that today she had navigated both with unshakable grace. The cabin air crackled with residual tension as Angela Bennett settled deeper into her seat. The leathers embraced a small comfort against the storm she had weathered. She drew in a steady breath, feeling the slight tremor of adrenaline in her chest, proof that standing one's ground could ignite a visceral fight or flight response, even at 35,000 feet. Around her, the hum of the engines and the soft clink of service trolleys resumed, but an undercurrent of collective respect had been forged in those moments of conflict, an invisible bond tying Angela to her fellow travelers. Evelyn Stokes, now relegated to 2A, flared with unspoken fury. Her perfect posture had slackened. Her golden hair, once a polished halo, seemed disordered at the nape. She pressed a gloved hand to her lap. Jaw clenched so tightly the diamonds in her bracelet caught the light in a harsh staccato. Angela observed the spectacle with neither schadenfreude nor pity, only a sober acknowledgement that privilege can masquerade as power, but dignity never imitates entitlement. Greg Foster approached with cautious steps, juggling a tablet in one hand and a menu in the other. His earlier pitch for seat swapping now felt like a hollow echo. "Miss Bennett," he said softly, voice unsteady. "I just want you to know that I appreciate how graciously you handled things." Angela offered him a small, genuine smile, an acknowledgement that his loyalty to fairness, however delayed, mattered. Deborah Lane hovered just beyond the aisle, arms folded beneath her crisp uniform. The flight supervisor's earlier reliance on Evelyn's platinum status had left a bitter mark on her conscience. Now, as she watched Angela's serene composure, Deborah felt a profound urge to make amends. She cleared her throat once before stepping forward. "Ms. Bennett," she began, voice firm but respectful. "Please accept my deepest apologies for the confusion. Your seat is fully honored, and we will ensure your remaining journey is seamless." Angela inclined her head, the faintest echo of relief passing through her. "Thank you, Deborah," she replied. "Respecting every customer's paid rights ought to be the simplest policy of all." Her words, quiet but unwavering, rippled through hushed rows of first-class seats. A banker to her left nodded, eyes bright with empathy. A family of 3 across the aisle exchanged relieved glances. Everywhere Angela looked, she saw faces softened by admiration. Evelyn Stokes, unable to remain passive any longer, rose unsteadily from 2A. The cabin's murmur hushed again as she stalked down the aisle, voice quivering with vindictive heat. "This is humiliating," she hissed, stopping beside Angela. "You'll pay for this, you and this airline." Her words, laced with vendetta, were a feeble attempt to reclaim authority, but in the glare of Angela's unshaken calm, they clanged like iron striking stone. Angela leaned forward, meeting Evelyn's fury with measured composure. "Miss Stokes," she said, voice soft but resolute, "you're free to feel whatever you wish. But understand this: basic decency and honoring contracts are not privileges. They're obligations." The cabin seemed to exhale. Even Evelyn's haughty bitterness lost its sharp edge against Angela's unassailable dignity. Passengers leaned in, drawn to Angela's steady gaze and the moral clarity she projected. A mother 2 rows back clasped her child's hand, eyes shining as if witnessing a quiet triumph of justice. A young couple whispered to each other, "She handled that so well." Phones discreetly sheathed recorded the scene, another piece of evidence that dignity under siege commands respect across every social divide. Greg moved down the aisle, offering water and towels with a newfound earnestness. His earlier complicity felt undone by his current humility. "Is there anything I can get you, Miss Bennett?" he asked, voice warm with sincerity. Angela simply nodded. "A fresh towel, please," she said. As Greg retreated, she turned her gaze back to the window for a moment, watching the sun dip below the horizon in a blaze of rose and gold. The world outside might still be fractured by prejudice, but here in this moment, humanity found solace. Deborah returned walking with purpose. In her hand was a fresh amenity kit, accompanied by a sincere bow. On behalf of everyone at Stratos Airlines, she said, "Please accept this as a token of our commitment to treating all passengers with absolute respect." She placed the kit gently on Angela's tray table before stepping away, her expression one of quiet resolve to rebuild trust. Angela unwrapped the soft blanket inside with deft fingers, feeling its warmth fold into her hands. As she draped it over her knees, she reflected on the showdown that had just concluded. It had been more than a fight for a seat. It was a stand against the notion that lineage or lavish spending confers moral superiority. Here, at 30,000 feet, she had demonstrated that true power emerges not from entitlement, but from rooted self-respect and the courage to demand equality. Around her first-class passengers resumed conversation, but their voices carried new respect and unspoken tribute to Angela's strength. A few moments later, the purser's voice crackled over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the earlier inconvenience and thank you for your patience. Our crew is here to ensure your comfort for the remainder of our flight." The announcement felt different now, imbued with genuine contrition rather than rote formality. Angela leaned back and allowed herself a small, contented sigh. The models of privilege and prejudice had both been tested and found wanting. As twilight settled in, painting the cabin in lavender hues, she closed her eyes briefly, savoring the quiet dignity that had carried her through the ordeal. In that silence, she sensed not isolation, but solidarity, a shared understanding that basic decency, once challenged, can inspire admiration and transform the very air we breathe. And high above the world, in the hush of first class, Angela held her head a little higher, knowing that her example had turned a moment of discrimination into a timeless lesson. Even under fire, dignity can and will prevail. Angela's pulse thrummed through her fingertips as she slipped her phone from the depths of her leather tote. The cabin lights above first class had already dimmed to their evening glow, painting the rows of cream upholstery in soft ambers and golds. Around her, the echo of her defiance still lingered. Evelyn Stokes seethed in 2A. Greg and Deborah hovered anxiously nearby, and fellow passengers stole cautious glances. Angela's jaw tightened as she realized that even the airline's own staff, entrusted with upholding every customer's rights, had bowed to privilege rather than principle. Her gaze flicked to the window where dusk had surrendered to night, and the world below had slipped into darkness. The skyline of Atlanta already glowed beneath the fuselage pinpricks of civilization stretching to every horizon. In that hushed moment, Angela felt the familiar weight of motherhood press against her heart. She was here to protect her children's legacy of dignity, no matter how far from home she flew. And so, with deliberate calm, she tapped the speed dial for her son Marcus Bennett, an icon of tech leadership, a champion of ethics, but above all, her son. The phone sank into the cradle of her ear. A gentle ringtone played, punctuated by the soft murmur of the cabin. A sleeping infant's creaking bassinet, the discreet shuffle of service carts, the quiet sighs of travelers settling in. Each sound formed part of the symphony of modern flight, yet tonight it underscored a moment that would soon ripple far beyond these seats. Marcus Evelyn's name wasn't on the display. Angela's lips curved into a tender smile, hearing the familiar tone of concern she had cultivated in him since his earliest steps. Mom Marcus's voice crackled softly through the in-flight network, tinted with the low hum of his Manhattan corner office. Even miles overhead, the precision of his leadership voice snapped to attention. "You're on your flight. What's wrong?" Angela pressed her phone closer, moderating her own voice to conceal cabin noise. I've run into a bit of discrimination up here in first class." She spoke with measured clarity, choosing each word like a carefully calibrated command. "A passenger demanded I give up my seat 1A, even though I paid for it. The crew sided with her until I held firm." Marcus paused. For a moment, Angela imagined the slow inhale of a man who had just learned that someone had dared challenge the dignity of his mother. "Who is it?" he asked, voice low. "Evelyn Stokes." Angela replied, "She's a platinum elite, worth a few million a year to the airline, apparently, but none of that changes my right to this seat." "Stay right there," Marcus said, urgency lacing his words. "I'm on it." In New York, Marcus ended the call and barely blinked before tapping another. On his phone, icons lined the screen: Bennett Global's executive contacts, global partners, and key allies. He selected Edward Harris, CEO of Stratus Airlines and longtime partner of Bennett Global. Before Marcus could speak, the line connected. Marcus Edward greeted his voice wry with surprise. "I thought you were in London." "I am," Marcus replied, keeping his tone calm but unyielding. "I need your immediate help. My mother is on one of your flights, and the cabin crew is siding with a passenger who demanded she give up her paid seat simply because she's more important. They're ignoring the manifest." Edward's voice shifted instantly serious. "Your mother? On my flight? That's unacceptable. Give me a minute to pull up the details." Marcus glanced at the cabin where Angela stood calmly, with the phone cradled to her ear, her posture resolute. "Check seat assignments. She's in 1A, paid and ticketed. The other passenger is in 2A, but insists on 1A because of her status. The crew is deferring to her." Edward exhaled a sound of restrained fury that Angela felt even through the cramped phone network. "This is completely out of line. Stay right there. I'm escalating it now." He hung up before Marcus could reply, and Marcus's fingers flew across the screen to activate his next call, the airline's Vice President of Operations, Julian Croft. Then he hit the key for corporate communications, ensuring no one could spin this into some pristine public relations apology unmoored from real accountability. In less than 30 seconds, he had emailed the master seat manifest to Edward, sent a direct line message to the Stratos CEO, and forwarded live cabin audio from Angela's call to Julian's secure inbox. Back on the plane, Angela closed her eyes, letting the phone's warmth seep into her palm. The cabin's tension held silent as a held breath. She listened, heard the soft murmur of other calls in the background, the whisper of engines humming their devotion to altitude. She imagined Marcus's office glass walls open to the Hudson River, all of New York's lights dancing at his feet, even as his mind focused on her crisis. The phone buzzed again, Victor's tone newly formal. Angela opened her eyes. Miss Bennett Edwards' voice came crisply through the speaker. "I have your reservation. I see the logjam with Ms. Stokes. I'm dispatching our senior management rep to your cabin right now. This will be handled at once. Please remain in your seat." Angela felt a wave of relief so powerful that if she hadn't been so composed, her eyes would have glistened. She inclined her head to the aisle, sounding the victory that reverberated through hushed rows. Greg, Deborah, and even Evelyn paused mid-simmer at the unexpected intervention. The phone remained pressed against Angela's ear as she responded, "Thank you, Edward. I appreciate your help." "Of course," he said. "My apologies for this situation. It won't happen again." He hung up and Angela exhaled, letting the call's finality stitch a new layer of calm around her. The cabin's ambient noise kicked back in a child's soft whimper. The clink of glasses. The flight crew's resumed hum of duty, but now the undercurrent was different. Where moments ago the air had crackled with conflict, it now gently thrummed with the promise of accountability. Angela looked down at her phone, her resolve tempered by gratitude. She slid the device back into her purse, the leather flap closing with a soft click. A few seats away, the purser's door opened, and Angela glimpsed the polished shoes of a senior management representative descending the aisle, proof that her son's call had cut through the barrier of altitude and bureaucracy. She settled back into the plush embrace of 1A, the seat that her own determination, backed by her son's influence, had ensured remained hers. Above her, the cabin lights glowed in muted celebration. In that unspoken quiet, Angela knew that principle, not privilege, would prevail tonight and in every voyage to come. The cabin door slid open with unexpected urgency, and a tall man in a tailored charcoal suit stepped briskly into the aisle. His crisp white shirt and navy tie marked him as someone whose authority stemmed from more than just a name tag. This was Richard Thompson, Senior Vice President of Flight Operations, a figure whose mere presence could shift boardroom strategy and airline policy in a single conversation. As he strode forward, the murmur of passengers died to a hush. Greg Foster, standing near 1A with a half-apologetic expression, froze mid-gesture. Deborah Lane, still reeling from her apology to Angela Bennett, blinked at the man who had entered like a thunderbolt. Richard's gaze swept the cabin in one fluid motion, first locking on Angela's calm, composed posture, then narrowing briefly at Evelyn Stokes, who had cloned her earlier entitlement into a pout of fury, and finally resting on Greg and Deborah, uniforms immaculate, but faces drained of confidence. With each step, the soft-carpeted aisle seemed to contract around him, as though he carried the full weight of the airline's reputation on his shoulders. Mr. Thompson. Greg stammered, pushing his tablet toward the VP in a futile display of data. "I'm so sorry, you must have gotten the wrong information." "No," Richard said, his voice low and resonant, cutting through the cabin's thickening tension. He slid his tablet out of Greg's grasp and tapped a few swift entries. "I have a full log of events, your conduct and failure to enforce valid reservations. It's all here." He held up the screen showing time-stamped notes. Audience reaction seat, manifest checks, passenger complaints. "Mr. Foster, you are suspended from duty effective immediately for gross misconduct." Passengers blinked in unified astonishment. A hush deeper than the preceding conflict fell over the cabin as Greg's shoulders slumped beneath the weight of corporate decree. He opened his mouth perhaps to plead innocence, but no words formed. Instead, he slid the tablet back under his arm, nodded once, a tiny broken gesture, and followed the two uniformed security officers who had materialized behind Richard, faces set with professional detachment. Evelyn Stokes, still reeling from her earlier mortification, stared at Richard with wide, panicked eyes. She had expected delay, perhaps a hasty apology from the flight supervisor or a voucher. She had never imagined the airline would side so unequivocally with Angela and punish its own staff. A few rows back, a businessman quietly steepled his fingers, eyes discreetly misting with relief that fairness had prevailed. Before Greg could reach the galley curtain, Richard turned to Deborah Lane. The flight supervisor tightened her jaw as though bracing for the blow. He did not hesitate. "Supervisor Lane, you are likewise suspended for enabling discrimination and failing to uphold our company's values. Please retrieve your personal items and remain in the galley until security escorts you off." Deborah's lips parted in a silent gasp. She glanced at Angela, who inclined her head in quiet acknowledgement. No triumph, only the gentle windfall of justice. Deborah swallowed hard, her professional poise shattered, and allowed the officers to guide her away. The cabin's collective exhale was audible, a wave of release carried on the recycled air. Only then did Richard allow himself to address the passengers. He stepped forward into the space between the rows, hands clasped behind his back. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Stratos Airlines, I sincerely apologize for the unacceptable conduct you've witnessed today," he began, voice unwavering. "We uphold the highest standards of respect and equality. Discrimination, whether based on birthright status or any other factor, is strictly prohibited. Our policies are clear, validated tickets must be honored, and every passenger has a right to be treated with dignity." He paused, letting the gravity of those words settle. A grandmother 2 rows over dabbed at her eyes, and even Evelyn, now perched awkwardly in 2A, broke her statue-still denial to blink in stunned comprehension. Richard's gaze held Evelyn's for a moment before returning to Angela. "Ms. Bennett, your patience and composure exemplify the very values we strive to embody. I am deeply sorry for the distress caused to you and your fellow passengers." Angela offered a measured nod, the corners of her mouth lifting in a small but genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she said. "I appreciate your swift action." Richard turned back to the aisle. "Crew, please resume service as soon as possible. I will be conducting a full review of our customer service protocols and employee training to ensure no one aboard ever endures such treatment again." His tone carried the promise of concrete change rather than hollow PR. "And to our passengers, you will each receive an apology voucher and lounge access upon arrival as a gesture of our remorse and commitment to improvement." With that, He tapped his earpiece and issued quiet instructions. Crew members dispersed with renewed purpose, restocking carts and offering refreshments with visible deference. The buzzing of conversations resumed gentle, restorative chatter that recognized both the severity of what had occurred and the relief of resolution. A mother 2 rows behind Angela disembarked her sleeping child from the bassinet, turning to offer Angela a gracious smile and whispered words of praise. Evelyn sat frozen still, processing the seismic shift in her fortunes. Her diamond studs gleamed through teary lenses, no longer symbols of unchallenged grandeur, but reminders of a moment's hubris. She pressed her palms to her forehead, as though propping up a crown that had been carelessly upended. Linda Harper hovered at her side, wringing her purse straps anxiously. Evelyn's voice, once crisp with entitlement, now trembled as she mouthed a feeble apology to the passengers around her. The cabin's empathy had decisively aligned with Angela. The silent murmurs that once spun sympathy had crystallized into solidarity. From the front of the cabin, Richard watched the transformation with professional resolve and personal satisfaction. He had entered as a potential flashpoint but emerged as the guardian of the airline's moral compass. His swift, uncompromising stance sent a clear message on Stratos flights: no passenger's privilege outweighs another's paid rights or fundamental decency. Angela leaned back against the seat's supportive cushion, savoring the return of calm. She traced the edge of the amenity kit Deborah had given her, the fabric of the blanket, inside a soft reminder that tokens can carry weight only when matched by earnest action. Tonight she had seen how swiftly principle can be enforced when leadership steps up, and how profoundly respect for every individual can transform an entire environment. As the lights dimmed further for overnight cruising, the cabin took on a serene glow. Passengers reclined, settling into their own moments of reflection, a businessman reaching for his notebook to jot down thoughts on corporate accountability, a young couple holding hands with renewed faith in fairness. Evelyn Stokes staring at the floor, learning that entitlement can be stripped away in an instant when it collides with unwavering principle. Richard made his way back toward the flight deck, pausing at Angela's seat. He offered a final nod, somber, respectful, and sincere. "Thank you for standing tall," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. Angela returned the nod, her eyes bright but calm. In the dim glow of the cabin, as the plane leveled out above the darkening landscape, Angela settled into the conclusion of this chapter. The storm had passed, and in its wake lay a reaffirmed commitment to dignity, equality, and the simple truth that no amount of privilege can override the basic rights we all hold. Above the clouds, she closed her eyes, letting a deep sense of peace settle in her heart, confident that this flight and the airline itself would never be quite the same again. Evelyn Stokes's world collapsed in slow motion as she was led down the aisle by 2 uniformed security officers. The cabin lights glinted off her diamond studs one last time, but their sparkle only highlighted her widening eyes and trembling hands. Every head in first class followed her progress, some with vindictive satisfaction, others with respectful sympathy for the woman who had dared to demand a paid seat from its rightful owner. But as Evelyn rounded the last row and approached the galley door, her most important status, her Platinum Elite membership, was about to be snatched away too. From the galley threshold strode William Harris, the airline's head of loyalty programs. He was an unassuming man in a tailored navy suit, salt and pepper hair neatly combed, and a calm authority radiating from his measured stride. His badge read W, Harris, in bold letters, but his reputation preceded him, the executive who'd built the loyalty division into a flagship of customer care, yet never once tolerated abuse of its privileges. Evelyn halted in her tracks, cuffs of rage and humiliation fluttering across her pale cheeks. She turned toward William, lips parted in a snarl. "You can't do this to me," she spat, voice thick with incredulous fury. "I've been a Platinum Elite member for years. I demand respect." Passengers craned to watch this final showdown, as though it were the season's climactic scene. Angela Bennett, seated in 1A, with quiet repose, watched from the corner of her eye, her own dignity intact. Even Greg and Deborah, suspended and slumped, had paused to absorb the sight of true corporate accountability. William met Evelyn's indignation with an even calm. He raised one gloved hand, palm outward, a gesture not of supplication, but resolution. "Mrs. Stokes," he began, voice low and resonant, Your behavior today has violated our code of conduct and our core values. As of this moment, your Platinum Elite status is revoked." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. The very concept of revoking her membership, stripping her of the elite privileges she had brandished like a talisman, was more damning than any fine. Evelyn's face drained from porcelain red to an ashen gray. The security officers exchanged a glance, waiting for her next move. "You can't." Evelyn's repeated voice fractured into a whimpering roar. You don't understand who I am." Sue William fixed her with a calm gaze that brooked no dispute. "We understand perfectly, Ms. Stokes. You are an elite member by spending and status, no argument there. But when you weaponize that status to demean and harass another passenger, you forfeit the privileges it entitles you to. Effective immediately, you will no longer receive elite benefits on any future flights." Her protest died in her throat as she realized the full weight of his words. No more priority check-in. No more extra baggage allowances. No complimentary upgrades or lounge access. The privileges she had taken for granted were gone, revoked by the very program she had abused. Evelyn's gloved fingers flexed at her sides. She opened her mouth as though to strike back with one of her practiced threats, but the words stuck halfway, strangled by the enormity of her fall. She looked from William to the security officers, her breathing ragged. Then she turned sideways as though checking whether the floor might swallow her alive before shuffling off into the galley corridor, shoulders shaking with impotent rage and shame. From her vantage, Angela observed Evelyn's unraveling with an empathetic heart. Though this woman had sought to destroy Angela's dignity, she was now being undone by principles that transcended personal vendettas. The sight of Evelyn, a figure who once walked these aisles as royal as any corporate queen being escorted from the plane, moved something in Angela's chest. Sorrow that someone so steeped in entitlement could never see how brittle it truly was. Back in the cabin, William turned to address the assembled passengers once more. He lifted his hand in a brief, respectful salute. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the incident and any distress it may have caused. We do not take these decisions lightly, but our commitment to fairness and respect is absolute. I assure you that this airline will continue to honor every passenger's paid rights and ensure a safe, respectful environment for all." As he spoke, a stewardess passed out bottles of water with discreet nods of solidarity toward Angela. Greg, now off duty but still in uniform, watched from the galley entrance, pride flickering in his eyes for having performed his duties under new, clearer standards. Deborah likewise lingered at the back, the weight of her earlier decisions evident in the slump of her shoulders. Both would later face retraining or worse, but in this moment they witnessed the real cost of allowing bias to eclipse policy. The cabin exhaled, returning to its ambient hum, soft conversations, the clink of silverware, the hush of reclining seats. But the mood had shifted permanently. Where arrogance once had threaded through the air like an invisible scent, now integrity and empathy reigned. Fellow passengers offered Angela nods of respect. A businessman discreetly lifted his glass in her direction. Outside, the night sky stretched indifferent to human drama, yet somehow luminous in its detachment. Angela allowed herself a small private smile, then leaned back as the engines droned into a steady rhythm. The night flight continued, but the turbulence above had passed. Her seat, her hard-earned sanctuary, was secure once more. All around her, the real lesson of the evening resonated: power, without compassion, is powerless, and privilege unchecked becomes its own downfall. As the flight attendant returned to offer Angela a fresh blanket, Angela met her gaze with gratitude. "Thank you for standing up for what's right," she murmured. The attendant nodded, understanding that this flight would be remembered not for its luxury but for its affirmation of fairness. In the quiet that followed, Angela gazed out the oval window. The patchwork of city lights below twinkled like distant stars, each one a life deserving respect. She closed her eyes, reflecting on the night's ordeal and the resolve it required. Somewhere above the clouds, amidst the hushed rows of first class, she felt an abiding sense of peace, knowing that dignity had triumphed over disdain and that true privilege was to be shared, not wielded as a weapon. For Evelyn Stokes, the ascent had ended in a precipitous descent. Her Platinum Elite status, each token of entitlement, was stripped away in a single moment of corporate intervention. But for Angela Bennett and the passengers of Flight 724, The flight's legacy would be one of restored justice, unbreakable dignity, and the enduring truth that respect cannot be bought. It must be earned and fiercely protected. The cabin's gentle glow deepened as the lights dimmed for the overnight cruise. Yet an electric charge still hummed through the air, the remnants of the earlier confrontation refusing to dissipate completely. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, half asleep but alert ears straining for the next chapter of this unanticipated drama. And then exactly as the flight attendant's pre-recorded announcement concluded, a new voice, not through the PA system, but from the cabin floor, rose clear and resonant. It was Julian Croft, Vice President of Customer Experience, walking the narrow aisle with confident strides. His navy suit was impeccable, his tie straight, but his open posture and approachable expression set him distinctly apart from the earlier standoff's cold formality. He carried no folder or tablet, only a measured awareness of the role he now needed to play. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice warm but unwavering, "thank you for your patience and your understanding." His tone held no hint of corporate spin, but rather the direct sincerity of someone who had witnessed a failure and felt compelled to set it right. The cabin shifted as if the air itself bent toward him, ready to absorb his words. He paused, letting the hush deepen. Even the hum of the engines seemed to soften in respect. "I'm Julian Croft, Vice President of Customer Experience for Stratos Airlines. I want to personally apologize for the unacceptable events that occurred on this flight. Disrespect, discrimination, and failure to honor a valid reservation are entirely against our values. You trusted us to provide a safe and comfortable journey, and we let you down." At those words, a murmur rippled through the cabin, a mixture of relief that someone was finally owning the mistake and admiration that the airline would send a senior executive on a midnight flight to do it. A mother a few rows back offered a quiet thank you, while a businessman nodded solemnly, his earlier displeasure melting into a cautious optimism. Julian lifted his gaze to Angela Bennett in 1A. Her composed demeanor spoke volumes, and he acknowledged her with a respectful nod. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "your steadfast dignity in the face of adversity reflects the very principles we aspire to uphold. I am deeply sorry you were subjected to such treatment." Angela inclined her head, letting the gratitude shine in her eyes. In her lap, her boarding pass fluttered like a small flag of victory, not only for her own rights, but for the collective standard of respect aboard every Stratos flight in the future. "Now," Julian continued, voice firm with resolve, "words alone are not enough. We are committed to meaningful action." With that, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a stack of pre-printed apology vouchers adorned with the airline's crest. He walked down the aisle, handing one to each passenger, vouchers redeemable for a full refund of the ticket price, plus complimentary access to any Stratos lounge worldwide for the next 6 months. Gasps of surprise and gratitude echoed through first class as the contents of the vouchers sank in. A young couple sharing honeymoon photos gasped, their camera-toting fingers trembling. A grandmother 2 rows over dabbed at her eyes, her voice catching as she read the words, "In recognition of our failure to deliver on our promise, please accept this full refund and our sincerest apologies." Julian paused to allow the passengers to absorb the gesture before lifting his gaze again. In addition, he said every passenger will receive a travel voucher for a future flight. No blackout dates, valid for 2 years. We know this does not erase what happened tonight, but we hope it demonstrates the seriousness with which we are addressing this issue. He walked back to the front of first class, placing the last voucher in Angela's hand. She looked up at him, a single smile, warming her composed features. In that moment, the cabin's tension melted entirely into a profound sense of closure and hope. Julian folded his hands behind his back and continued, "Finally, I want you to know that we are undertaking a comprehensive review of our service protocols. Our flight crews will undergo mandatory training on unconscious bias, conflict, de-escalation, and passenger rights. We will be revising our policies to ensure that a validated ticket is never questioned, or we will accept the consequences. This overhaul will be completed by the end of the quarter, and we will publicly share our progress." Murmurs of approval followed. Passengers exchanged glances, some nodding vigorously, as though the promise of systemic reform meant they would no longer fear arbitrary mistreatment. A father touched his child's arm gently. whispering reassurance to a toddler who had slept through the chaos, but now sensed the emotional undercurrent. Julian allowed the applause, both soft and heartfelt, to wash over him before offering a final thought. We understand that trust is earned, and we've taken a blow to ours tonight. I pledge to you that we will earn it back seat by seat, flight by flight. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to set things right. Now please enjoy the remainder of your flight, and know that we are dedicated to serving you with the respect and professionalism you deserve. He stepped back, letting the cabin merge back into service. Flight attendants resumed their duties with renewed purpose, offering water and blankets with genuine warmth rather than routine courtesy. The hum of low conversation began anew, but it was a hum charged with the assurance that change was coming. In the quiet aftermath, Angela sat back and eyed the last of the vouchers shining against her tray table. She thought of her son, Marcus Bennett, whose call had set these wheels in motion. She thought of the countless small battles that go unseen, fought by individuals demanding only what they've earned. And she thought of the horizon of possibilities now turned brighter by this airline's unexpected act of contrition. Evelyn Stokes, confined to 2A, watched Julian leave with a mixture of shock and envy. No silver spoon, no amount of status could have conjured the same breadth of accountability. The reality was clear: entitlement without empathy falls flat against the weight of genuine contrition and reform. Angela glanced around the cabin one last time. Fellow travelers met her eyes with nods of respect, their words unspoken but their hearts full. In this cocoon of mid-air vulnerability, she had witnessed the transformation of hatred into a promise of accountability. The sky outside was now a deep velvet black, dotted with distant stars, each a reminder that above us all there exists a higher standard, one of fairness, dignity, and unwavering respect. As Julian's footsteps receded and the cabin lights dimmed further, Angela closed her eyes. She felt the gentle sway of the aircraft, the soft whisper of engines carrying them toward dawn. In that moment, she allowed herself to believe that tonight's mea culpa was not just an apology, but a true turning point, a pledge to ensure that privilege never again trampled principle, but that principle would always stand unbowed at 35,000 feet and beyond. The Boeing 787's wheels kissed the runway with a gentle shudder, the final act of a transcontinental odyssey that had been anything but routine. As the cabin lights brightened and the seatbelt signs blinked off, an unexpected energy pulsed through the cabin, an undercurrent of hope and anticipation that had nothing to do with the cooling breeze slipping through the open door. Passengers gathered their things under a renewed sense of confidence, knowing they had borne witness to more than a mid-flight drama. They'd witnessed the birth of a promise. Within the hour, Stratos Airlines had assembled a small press contingent in the gleaming arrival hall of London Heathrow. Reporters from global outlets lined up cameras at the ready microphones, poised to capture what would soon be a landmark announcement. On stage stood Edward Harris, the airline's CEO, flanked by Marcus Bennett, whose own company had partnered closely with Stratos for years. Between them, a simple freestanding banner displayed the emblem of the new program, the Lily Initiative, named in honor of Angela Bennett's granddaughter, Lily, whose calm presence had underscored the moral heartbeat of the entire conflict. Edward tapped the podium, his gaze sweeping the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice measured yet alive with conviction. "Today we make good on the commitments we voiced mid-air. The Lily Initiative is our pledge to you, our passengers, our partners, and our people, that the shortcomings exposed during Flight 724 will catalyze transformative change across our entire operation." He paused, meeting Marcus's steady gaze before continuing. "Effective immediately, we are mandating unconscious bias training for every single one of our frontline employees, from the ticket agents greeting you at check-in to the pilots navigating our skies. This training will encompass real-world scenarios, role-playing exercises, and ongoing assessments to ensure that no passenger's credentials, appearance, or background will ever again be questioned without cause." A reporter from a leading aviation journal raised her hand. "Mr. Harris, how will you ensure this training isn't just another tick-the-box exercise?" Edward offered a confident smile. "We've partnered with the Bennett Global Foundation to develop a dynamic curriculum overseen by experts in social psychology and conflict resolution. Furthermore, Completion won't just be measured by attendance. Employees will be required to demonstrate practical application through periodic audits of customer interactions with direct feedback loops, linking performance to professional development. Marcus then stepped forward, adjusting his suit jacket. Thank you, Edward. As someone who witnessed my own mother's ordeal firsthand, I can attest that unconscious bias is insidious. It thrives in the smallest assumptions. That's why the Lily Initiative also includes dedicated family boarding lanes at every major hub, giving solo parents who often juggle strollers, carry-ons, and infants a streamlined path to their seats. No one should have to navigate these complexities under the judgmental stares of fellow travelers. He paused, scanning the crowd. And for those traveling without a partner or caregiver, particularly single mothers and fathers, I'm proud to announce a $50 million fund earmarked specifically to support them. These grants will cover unexpected expenses, last-minute seat upgrades for families in need, childcare services at long layovers, and emergency travel assistance when plans fall through. We'll administer the fund through a transparent application process managed by a third-party nonprofit to ensure fairness and accountability. The clack of keyboards and shutter clicks punctuated the hall as journalists recorded every word. A cameraman panned to show a close-up of Angela Bennett standing to the side, her poise unmistakable. Linda Harper. Evelyn's assistant lingered with a notebook in hand, documenting every commitment with the intensity of a convert. Even Greg Foster and Deborah Lane, now rehired under probationary terms, watched with what looked like awe and perhaps relief that the airline would invest so deeply in shaping its culture. Edward raised his hands in a concluding gesture. We are under no illusions. Trust, once broken, must be earned over time. The Lily Initiative is not a one-off announcement. It's a multi-year campaign that will evolve with feedback, industry best practices, and most importantly, your experiences. We will publish quarterly progress reports accessible to the public so you can hold us accountable. Tonight, our flight may have been defined by the courage of one passenger. Going forward, it will be defined by the integrity of every interaction you have with Stratus Airlines. A ripple of applause swept through the hall, genuine and sustained. Passengers from Flight 724 nodded at one another, sharing a moment of camaraderie that transcended borders. Marcus and Edward shook hands, symbolizing the fusion of corporate responsibility and consumer advocacy, while Angela allowed herself a small, contented smile, pride in her son, relief in the airline's commitment, and a subtle hope for Lily's future journeys. As the press conference concluded, a line of passengers from Flight 724 approached the stage. They mingled with Stratos executives and Bennett Global representatives, sharing personal stories and forging connections that once seemed improbable. A single mother recounted how the boarding corridor would change her layovers in Dubai. An elderly couple marveled at the thought of not needing to prove their seating credentials again. A lone father of twins gripped Marcus's hand in thanks for the upcoming fund that would ease his next transatlantic trip. Meanwhile, Evelyn Stokes observed from the back of the hall, her designer attire a stark contrast to the throngs of genuine gratitude swirling around her. She stood alone, status stripped, as a new ethos took root, one that valued empathy over entitlement. It was a sight that underscored an immutable truth: privilege without compassion is a fragile throne. Outside the terminal, the night air buzzed with renewed energy under the bright runway lights. Angela, Marcus, and Edward stepped onto the curbside curb, exchanging final words of solidarity before parting ways. Angela wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the crisp London air tinged with possibility. She looked at her son, eyes gleaming with love and admiration. "You did it," she murmured, voice thick with emotion. "You turned one unfair moment into something that will help thousands." Marcus smiled, placing a comforting arm around her. "You set the example, Mom. I just helped make it real." Edward approached, offering both of them a warm handshake and a genuine grin. "Thank you, Ms. Bennett," he said. "Your courage paved the way. We're committed to making sure no one else has to fight for their dignity in the skies." Angela nodded, gratitude shining in her expression. "We're all in this together," she replied. As taxis whisked them toward their respective destinations, Angela and family to a nearby hotel. Marcus, to a late-night board meeting. Edward back to the Stratos headquarters. The legacy of the Lily Initiative unfolded across their thoughts. In the days to come, Boarding gates and cabin corridors everywhere would bear the imprint of this moment, shaped by one mother's unyielding resolve and a son's unwavering support. And high above the world's patchwork of lights, the Lily Initiative soared as a beacon, reminding every traveler that compassion once institutionalized becomes the true altitude of service, elevating not just an airline, but the humanity of all who take flight. As dawn broke over major global hubs, the story of Flight 724's transformation rippled outward from the confines of an airplane cabin into boardrooms, newsrooms, and classrooms around the world. Financial Times lead their front page with Stratos Airlines' Lily Initiative, a new era of compassion in travel. The Wall Street Journal followed with an in-depth profile interviewing industry analysts who called the sweeping reforms a watershed moment for customer service. Broadcast networks ran segments on morning television anchors recounted the harrowing details of Angela Bennett's ordeal, then lauded Stratos Airlines for turning a PR crisis into an exemplar of accountability. In the days that followed, competitor airlines found themselves in a flurry of internal memos and emergency meetings. At Fly Global Airways, the CEO stood before her senior leadership team holding a printed copy of Stratus's public progress report. "We cannot afford to lag behind," she declared. "Lily. Initiative or something like it must be our priority. I want proposals on my desk within 48 hours for unconscious bias training and improved protocols for passengers traveling with infants and solo parents." Across the aisle at Continental Horizon, the CCO convened a cross-departmental task force to audit customer service interactions from the last 6 months, determined to root out any patterns of discrimination before they could metastasize. Meanwhile, in prestigious business schools from Harvard to INSEAD, professors rewrote their syllabi overnight. Case studies that once centered on supply chain optimization or digital transformation now integrated the Flight 724 saga as a core example of ethical leadership and crisis management. Students pored over timelines of decisions, Angela's calm defiance, Marcus's decisive phone call, Richard Thompson's swift suspensions, Julian Croft's mid-flight mea culpa, and the unveiling of the Lily Initiative. They debated the balance between profit and principle, the cost of loyalty programs versus the cost of human dignity, and the lasting power of policies anchored in compassion. On campus, diverse groups of students from aspiring CEOs to future HR executives hosted spirited panel discussions. One evening at Stanford Graduate School of Business, an MBA student moderated a debate. Was Stratus's response genuine reform or simply enlightened self-interest? Panelists cited data on post-initiative customer satisfaction scores and leakage in elite membership renewals. They examined the $50 million fund's potential ROI in customer loyalty, but also emphasized how a single mother, once an invisible revenue line, had become the catalyst for systemic change. Far beyond academia, the story found new life in the digital realm. Lena Cho, the micro-influencer whose live stream had captured the live drama, expanded her Justice in the Skies series into a weekly show. Her first follow-up episode featured interviews with solo parents who'd used the Lily Initiative Fund for emergency childcare during long layovers. View counts soared into the millions as ordinary travelers shared their own stories of discrimination and solidarity. Lena's studio, once a modest corner of her apartment, now buzzed with production crews, and her subscribers jumped from tens of thousands to over 2 million in a matter of weeks. Travel blogs and community forums lit up with threads dissecting every facet of Stratus's overhaul. One family travel website posted a guide titled "How to Advocate for Yourself in the Air," drawing on tips gleaned from Angela's calm assertiveness. A beloved aviation podcast devoted an entire episode to preventing prejudice at 35,000 feet, with host after host pledging to lobby for similar initiatives at their favorite carriers. Airline employees around the globe exchanged notes on secure forums, host attendants from Tokyo to Toronto, comparing bias training modules, swap notes on guest interaction scripts, and share screenshots of new family boarding signage installed at their local airports. Even government bodies took notice. Parliamentary committees in the UK and Canada cited the Lily Initiative as exemplary corporate self-regulation, urging regulators to consider formal guidelines for passenger dignity and discrimination prevention. In Washington, a congressional hearing on consumer protection in air travel referenced Flight 724 as evidence that industry-led reforms can outpace bureaucratic mandates, but only when leaders commit to ethical accountability. At the heart of these echoes was the enduring image of Angela Bennett, a composed black mother seat 1A, her battleground dignity, her weapon. Her refusal to cede a purchased seat had transcended personal vindication and sparked a movement. In the weeks following the initial announcement, Angela herself appeared in a widely viewed interview with PBS NewsHour. She spoke not as a CEO or executive, but as a mother forging a better path for others. "I didn't set out to become a symbol," she told the anchor. "I simply refused to accept disrespect. I hope that anyone facing discrimination will know they have the right and the power to speak up." Her words were shared across social media, captioned with hashtags like #dignity in the skies and #Lily initiative. Celebrities and activists lent their voices to the conversation, urging their followers to demand similar reforms across all travel industries. A major nonprofit coalition for children's welfare issued a statement praising the concept of dedicated family boarding as the next frontier in accessible travel for all ages. Within Stratos Airlines, the corporate headquarters buzzed with the entrepreneurial spirit of this newfound purpose. Product teams worked alongside community outreach departments to design mobile app features that flagged solo parent travelers for optional assistance. Customer service scripts were rewritten to include empathy checkpoints, simple prompts reminding agents to ask, "Is there anything I can do to make your journey easier?" Ground staff at regional hubs received laminated wallet cards summarizing the key tenets of the Lily Initiative Respect Dignity Support. 6 weeks after the initiative's launch, an internal report revealed a 32% increase in first-class loyalty renewals, a 45% uptick in positive social media mentions, and a marked drop in customer service complaints. More profoundly, Stratos employees reported feeling prouder of their airline's culture. Engagement scores rose as frontline staff saw the real impact of their work on passengers' lives. The change wasn't merely cosmetic, it was woven into the fabric of daily operations. As these industry-wide echoes reverberated, Angela Bennett looked back on her flight with a profound sense of fulfillment. What had started as a personal stand for her rights had blossomed into a blueprint for systemic compassion, an unexpected legacy born at 30,000 feet. In the power of a single mother's quiet resolve, the world had glimpsed how dignity could reshape an entire industry. And high above the trajectory of commerce and policy, the Lily Initiative soared its echoes, promising that in every future journey, respect would board alongside the passengers, ensuring that no one's dignity would ever again be checked at the gate. The cool air of post-Brexit England carried a whisper of damp earth and blooming wisteria as Angela Bennett stepped off the shuttle into her mother's garden courtyard. The early evening sky hovered between cobalt and indigo, and the soft hum of crickets rose in gentle harmony. Angela's heart swelled as she navigated the stone pathway, her travel-weary shoulders finally unburdened. She had only sought a safe journey home, a mere promise of comfort and respect, on a transatlantic flight. Instead, she'd witnessed and ignited a transformation that stretched far beyond seat assignments and boarding passes. Through the ivy-clad archway, she spotted her own mother, Lily's grandmother, waiting beside the gnarled olive tree that had witnessed countless family milestones. The older woman's warm smile and outstretched arms seemed to radiate every ounce of pride and relief Angela had felt in the tumultuous hours before. In her arms, little Lily cooed sleepily, the day's excitement stirring her bright eyes. The infant's chubby hands curled gently around the shawl that draped Angela's shoulders, as though claiming the final chapter of their journey as her birthright. "Mom." Angela whispered, voice thick with emotion, "We made it." Her mother, whose own story had begun decades earlier with a single mother's determination in a shifting world, lifted Lily higher. "You did more than make it," she replied, eyes glistening in the dusk light. "You changed the skies." Angela eased herself down onto a low stone bench beside the courtyard's koi pond, its placid water reflecting the last traces of sunset. Lily nestled contentedly against her chest, her tiny fingers brushing Angela's collarbone. In that quiet tableau, the world's complexity seemed to distill into 3 simple beings bound by blood and an unspoken covenant of dignity. As crickets chirped overhead, Angela reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd boarded Flight 724 expecting routine courtesy, only to encounter a gauntlet of entitlement and bias. Surrounded by opulence, she had been forced to assert her fundamental rights, truths, as basic as a paid reservation. Yet what began as a personal stand had morphed into a movement: her son's decisive intervention from New York, the swift corporate shakeup, the airline's public apology, and the launch of the Lily Initiative. The reverberations had echoed across industries, prompting reforms, sparking academic inquiry, and galvanizing travelers worldwide. Lily, sensing her mother's introspective pause, pressed her forehead gently against Angela's chin. The infant's soft coo reminded Angela of the reason for her resolve to secure a world where her granddaughter and every child could travel free of judgment. She stroked Lily's hair, a cascade of dark curls that contrasted with her grandmother's silver strands. In that moment, the generational bridge felt profound: her mother's sacrifices, Angela's stand, and Lily's bright promise. Angela inhaled the fragrant spring air, a tapestry of jasmine and damp moss, and smiled at her mother. "I never imagined that one flight could change so much," she said softly. Her mother nodded, crouching to pick a fallen wisteria blossom and tuck it into Angela's hair. "The greatest changes often begin with the simplest acts of courage," she replied. "You refuse to be small." They sat side by side on the bench, 3 generations linked by resilience. Across the pond, koi swirled in lazy loops, oblivious to human dramas, but embodying calm persistence. The bench's old wood bore the patina of countless seasons, much like the family's enduring legacy of forging opportunity out of adversity. "Did you see the headlines?" Angela asked, leaning closer. "Business schools around the world are teaching our story. Competitors are launching their own versions of the Lily Initiative, and Lena Cho's Justice in the Skies series has millions of viewers." Her mother chuckled. "I saw. I was on the phone with my book club when someone exclaimed, 'Angela Bennett! That Angela Bennett!'" You had to remind them it was our family. Angela chuckled in return, the sound echoing across the courtyard. She glanced at Lily, who gazed at them with bright curiosity. "I hope she grows up knowing that entitlement can be challenged and that compassion can prevail even at 35,000 feet," she said. Her mother placed a hand on Angela's shoulder. "She will," she assured, "because you showed her how." Silence settled again, comfortable and reflective. The day's earlier rush, security checks, boarding aisles, corporate summons, felt like a distant fever dream compared to this serene homecoming. Yet Angela understood that it was these extremes that had crystallized her convictions for Lily's future: the knowledge that respect costs nothing and that bigotry, once confronted, cannot endure. Above the garden wall, a plane traced a faint contrail under the emerging stars, a silent reminder that the skies remained both a challenge and a conduit for change. Angela watched as the aircraft vanished into the night, and she whispered a quiet hope that every subsequent flight would be safer, kinder, fairer for families like hers and for travelers of all backgrounds. Lily's eyelids drooped in slumber, the day's excitement giving way to restful peace. Angela pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her granddaughter's head. "Sleep well, little one," she murmured. "The world is working to be better for you." Her mother draped an arm around Angela's shoulders, drawing her into a warm embrace. In that familial cocoon, the ripple effects of Flight 724's events felt both monumental and intimately personal. They had all played their parts: a mother's quiet bravery, a son's decisive intervention, an executive's accountability, and an industry's willingness to transform. Now, in this peaceful English evening, they were witnesses and participants in a legacy that fused personal dignity with systemic compassion. As darkness deepened, the garden lanterns flickered on, casting golden pools of light on the winding path. Angela rose slowly, tucking the wisteria blossom into her hair and cradling Lily in her arms. Together with her mother, they walked toward the house, each step a testament to the journey that had united them. Each heartbeat a reminder that respect endures when courage meets conviction. Inside, the warm glow of lamplit rooms beckoned. Angela carried Lily across the threshold, feeling the soft tumble of familial love and gratitude in every fiber of her being. Her mother followed with a gentle smile, closing the door behind them. Outside, the night settled in peaceful and infinite, a void ready to reflect their ongoing story. In that stillness, Angela knew the legacy was secure. A vision of travel elevated by human dignity, a corporate culture realigned toward empathy, and the intimate truth that a steadfast principle can reshape systems, change hearts, and chart a path forward for the ones we love. High above and far below the echoes of their stand would resonate proof that in any era or altitude, respect costs nothing, and bigotry once challenged can never endure.